Hi, everyone. Welcome to another session of Canvas Live. Canvas Live sessions are presented by Canvas community members and/or Instructure employees to help Canvas users improve and enhance their teaching and learning with Canvas. And today we have Nicolina Wilson with us again for a second in her three-part series of Engaging K-12. Nicolina, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Nicolina Wilson. I am excited to share with you some more information today about engaging our K-12 students or whatever audience in education that you are a part of, whether you're creating some fantastic professional development for teachers or for your staff, or you are a teacher and you're developing project-based learning for your students. Hopefully you'll get some meaningful, exciting ideas and knowledge today. Just a little synopsis about what we're going to do today and what we're going to talk about. We're talking about how project-based learning really does engage students and create student-centered learning in your classroom, in your learning setting. We're going to talk about starting with the basics and what is project-based learning and what it isn't. We're going to talk about why it really is impactful to students and how you can plan and develop your own professional development, your own project-based learning, whether it be for your professional development or for your classroom. Just a little bit about myself. I am an innovation specialist for my school district, Seminole County Public Schools in Orlando, Florida. And my job is to innovate and make schools more exciting and more engaging and really prepare students for their future, equipped with the skills that they'll need to be successful beyond graduation. I aim to make students love learning and create really meaningful learning experiences for the students in our school district. So I hope to share some of that knowledge and information I've gained with you today. That being said, let's get started. So beginning with the basics, what is project-based learning? Maybe you have done this already and you're just coming for a refresher. Maybe you are embarking on this at your school. Maybe your administrator said that you're going to start with this next school year. Maybe you want to implement some more project-based learning tomorrow. Whatever your need is, maybe you're not actually calling it project-based learning. Maybe it's problem-based or inquiry-based or passion-based, et cetera, et cetera. There are many names for project-based learning. A lot of them have the same basic principles, regardless of what you call project-based learning or what your definition of it is. We typically see that it is students gaining knowledge and skills by working for an extended period of time, right, to investigate and respond to complex questions, problems, challenges, and ask and answer questions of each other. We derive that from the Buck Institute of Education model. I'm going to be sharing with you, that is the model that we utilize in our district for project-based learning, but all the models are very similar. They just might use different context or research in order to create their model. So I'm going to go over it using their framework, but I encourage you to do some exploring and figure out what fits the needs of your institution. When we teach our project-based learning professional developments, we kind of give out resources from a whole bunch of different organizations, and we use Edutopia's research and their great articles. So don't be afraid to utilize different ones that meet your needs. So we're talking about what project-based learning is and the importance of getting students engaged in a purposeful act of learning that the students have choice in, that they choose to participate in. Really purposeful activities is part of what project-based learning is, where the teacher becomes a partner in the learning process, really guiding students to both independently and collaboratively discover meaning and participate in the learning process, not have the learning be told to them. So that being said, one of the easiest ways to know and see what project-based learning is to figure out what it is not. So project-based learning is not projects for project's sake. There's a huge myth about project-based learning that a lot of people claim that they are doing project-based learning in their classrooms. And I guarantee you, a whole lot of them are just doing projects. So we're going to talk about the difference between the two and debunk this myth. because projects for project's sake happen after the learning has been delivered to the students. In true project-based learning, the students participate in and experience the learning, and it happens during the project. So let's talk about what else project-based learning is not. It is not teacher-centered. It is definitely student-centered. Independent work. There can be independent work as a part of the project-based learning process, but it is not 100% inherently independent work. It is not students always doing work at their seats. It is not traditional style of lecture, sit and get. It is student-centered and learner-centered. It engages the students in rigorous question and answering and exploration and discovery. So this is one of the best ways to get the buy-in from the student to participate in the learning. We want our students to be active learners. We talked about that in our webinar last week, which I encourage you to go watch or listen to if you're interested. It's all about activating learning for the students. And one of the greatest ways to activate learning for our students is have them participate in project-based learning. It's not remote, rote memorization, practicing 50 math problems. It is giving the students personal agency and voice and opportunities to express themselves as part of the learning. The last thing I'll talk about with the what is that project-based learning is not the dessert. We talk about it as project-based learning really is the main course. The dessert comes after the meal, unless you're having a really good treat yourself day and you're having dessert for your meal. But that's not what we want from our students. We want them to participate in the process as the main course of building this project. It's not the carrot that we dangle at the end of the learning. After you listen to this lecture, watch this video, hear this direct instruction, then we're gonna do a project. Is there some background knowledge that you want to share? Sure, but it really needs to be in the form of a hook, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. It's not traditional instructional strategies that the learning happens through. It's the main course where the students are really active in the learning process. So I'm already talking about, as we're talking about the what, the why, and that real wow factor that project-based learning can inspire. The why to use project-based learning, it encourages that need to know in your students. It inspires curiosity. It has purposeful activity. There's a reason that is authentic, that the students are learning this information. The purpose is not to pass the test, to fill out the worksheet, to get the grade. All of that happens, but it's with a bigger purpose in mind, which really does play to the intrinsic motivation of humans, of our students as human beings. It definitely helps the learning come alive. We're talking all about student engagement in all of our webinars, using Canvas as a vehicle to really engage students. It is a great tool in order to help learning come alive for your students and engage students through project-based learning and many other different active learning styles, such as student learning quests, which we're going to talk about next in the next webinar. But it also promotes and helps learning happen outside the classroom. It engages community members. It doesn't have to be just you and your students engaging in this learning process. It can be partner classrooms or school-wide or across schools, or if there's no one else in your school community watching this or doing this project-based learning processes, then break down those barriers. Think outside the four walls of your classrooms. Reach out via Twitter or YouTube or other ways that you reach out to your community in Facebook, and find people that are engaging in these styles of learning, because they are out there. It definitely allows for differentiation, and differentiation both along the way and in the final product. So we're going to talk a little bit about group roles and their part in project-based learning and how that really helps differentiate for our learners. It offers opportunities for both independent and group work depending on the part of the process and depending on the role of the student. Also promotes positive relationship building. Project-based learning can't happen without relationships, whether it be peer-to-peer relationships, teacher-student relationships. It really fosters a different creative relationship between teachers and students and between students themselves, where they're not competing against each other unless you're creating some kind of competitive challenge and it's a positive environment for your students. But it really creates this dynamic where they're working together to reach a common goal, answer an essential question, or find that knowledge that's almost at their grasp but not quite there, allows them to participate collaboratively in that productive struggle. So it builds teamwork and group skills and things that really are going to help our students be successful beyond the classroom into the real world. And school doesn't need to only prepare students for getting to the next grade level. We talk a lot about having our students have meaningful diplomas. Our superintendent is really inspiring our administrators and our students to have a meaningful diploma, which means they know the skills that they have to offer, their strengths. They have a pathway that they have explored different pathways and realized and figured out what they don't want to do, as well as what they do want to do in their future, whether it be college, career, being really great citizens that are active in their environment. So project-based learning really does offer those different opportunities. It also encourages creative expression, right? It can be as cross-disciplinary and cross-curricular as we allow it to be. The project-based learning process isn't, you know, a one-to-one ratio of skill to student learning. It is better when there are multiple facets and there are complex research and problem solving and curiosity that the students get into and become passionate about and become excited about. Along with it being research supported, it really does promote a lifelong learning. It begins to get students not just compliance, right? We talked about levels of engagement last week in the webinar. It's not just getting them to participate and do the learning and comply and figure out the worksheet or answer the question, which our students are pretty good at doing. But it promotes that more curious, lifelong learning growth mindset in our students and encourages them to create a creative way to express what it is that they're trying to find out and figure out what resources that they have in order to make that happen and create real, meaningful, sticky learning for them. Above all else, it makes learning fun. It allows learning to be students working together, having fun. And that's what we want to bring back into our schools and encourage our students and our teachers to want your students to do, is have fun. So let's talk about how to make this happen. So this is the meat of the of the presentation here. When you're thinking about how to get started or how to make it better, whether you're going from an enhancement perspective or you're going from a perspective of, okay, I'm starting this from square one, you want to be hooked. Set the vision. Get excited about what you're going to do, and it will make them excited. The more excited you are about the project, about the project-based learning that you're going to facilitate as the teacher, as the leader, the more excited and engaged your students will be. And maybe you don't even have to show it. Maybe it's in the vibe that you have created in your learning space. Think about flexibility. Think about ways to create a different environment that is meeting the needs of what this project-based learning plan has to offer. Have them watch a trailer to get them excited about what they're going to do. Start off with a skit or something really cheesy and corny. It makes them laugh. Laughter is a great way to get students engaged and having fun. Put some music on. Get them in the vibe. Start off with an inspirational video or a TED Talk, or have them play a game. There are many different examples of how you can get your project-based learning planning started, but you can use Canvas to deliver all these different things to your students and help them through this project-based learning process that is student-centered, because maybe you've done all the work beforehand, and heck, you're planning as you go, because we know students and teachers, we don't have a lot of time. But we can use Canvas as that delivery tool to get students engaged. So in order to get started on the planning process, right, we're going to create an action plan for our project-based learning. It's got to be flexible, man. It's got to be adaptable, because the plan that is very much by the book and straightforward and to the letter, you're going to get off track pretty fast. There's definitely ways that you can encourage students to think about and inquire about and challenge them in a way to get the standards across that you need to get across. But it's got to be as I like to call it, it's a plan in quotation marks, right? Put quotation marks around the word plan. Plan to have some mid-course corrections. Plan to put bumpers, bumpers on a bowling alley. Plan to put bumpers on there so that the students, if they start veering off track, you want to be the teacher that kind of scoots them right back on the track in order to get the learning to continue to progress forward. Think about the environment that you're creating to get started in and the relationships you've already cultivated or you're cultivating through this. And think about how group roles can support your project-based learning. Having all students participate in the same parts of the group sometimes gets a little challenging, especially if students haven't done this before. The need for group roles in the very beginning of students participating in project-based learning is much greater than the need for that after students are accustomed to this learning style and this type. So I encourage you to plan accordingly and give that students that organized chaos, that organized structure in the beginning with bumpers, but then also start to let go. And I'm going to say that from the beginning of this how-to, of this planning part of the process, don't be afraid to let go. Your students will need some of you to back off. You want to answer the questions for them. You want to help them and point them in the right direction. But it's much more meaningful and impactful if they get there on their own. So that being said, how can you begin to plan for your project-based learning? So this is the Buck Institute of Education model for project-based learning, and it is the framework that we like to utilize, the gold standard. It is just one way. It's an exemplary model based on research and has plenty of free tools for teachers about how to plan a project, but this is the process that we use to plan. So I'm going to talk you through how we really do create this process. Using this process, we create our project-based learning. The first step is figuring out the challenge or the problem or the driving question. What is the whole heart and soul of this project? What is it about? Is it a problem that the students are going to investigate and solve and work together to solve? Is it a question that they're going to explore and figure out their interpretation and answer? It can be concrete. And it can be as abstract as you be. So engaging problems and questions makes the learning so much more meaningful to the students. So we build essential questions for a variety of reasons, right? We either have a learning goal or an essential overarching theme in whatever topics that you are delivering. But putting it in an open-ended format that is student-friendly is the key to creating a really impactful, exciting, driving question or problem, and presenting it in an innovative way with a hook also starts the project off on the right foot. And it's much easier to put the bumpers on and help them veer back on the right track and veer on the path than if you got them started in a really lackluster way. If they're already inspired, if they're already excited, if they're already engaged, you can continue the motivation much easier than if you started that part of the process halfway through. Think about how to make this driving problem and question as active for the students as possible. And that leads to number 2, is really figuring out and planning for inquiry. So we have our teachers plan for questioning, plan the questions that if you are participating in this challenge, problem, or question, what are the things that you might run into? Have some of those questions in your back pocket, because the more you plan for them, you're going to find the times that maybe this group of students or that student over there needs some of that encouragement and inquiry. So this is both a student and a teacher part of the process. So obviously inquiry, right, is to seek information and investigate. But it's more active and in-depth than that. It's more than just looking something up in a book or online or from their other class. The inquiry process, the sustained inquiry process, takes time, sustained, right? It lasts more than a few days, and it can be co-aligned with some of these other parts that are coming up next. This part actually, to me, when I get to do this with my students or with teachers in a PD setting, this part almost never ends. This is the part where you become the facilitator of the learning as the teacher and not the giver out of all knowledge. So this process, it repeats until there's a good solution to the answer or a great learning aha moment that has happened. And it's iterative, right? You want your students iterating when they're confronted with problems or challenges or questions, both in school and in the real world. We want them to ask questions, answer them, think deeper and ask more questions, answer them, think deeper and ask more questions. This is a life skill, right, that the PBL process innately creates in your learners and in yourself, that we want our students to embody, so that as they're passionate and excited about doing things in the real world and for their future, they have that intrinsic need and motivation to keep asking, to keep finding, to look deeper, to think harder about whatever it is. So that sustained inquiry process is made more palatable for students and more engaging for students by its authenticity. So what does authentic mean in the project-based learning process? Authenticity increases student motivation and learning. It gives students a real reason to make this learning active and come to life, right? How real world is the task that you've asked, is the project that you have your students participating in? So it can have authentic context when students are trying to solve a problem outside of their school setting, that they can take the process and use some of the strategies that they have learned during PBL, and maybe they are advising someone to do something, or they are figuring out their business plan in the future, or they're developing their home business, or their babysitting business, or their YouTube channel. But they're things that students can take and utilize in the real world, in their real life. So that could be the authentic context of it. Or it can have a real impact on others, right? So there could just be an authentic audience or an authentic partner you have in creating this project for students. Maybe they're creating it for one of your business partners at your school, or for the local community, or to better the school itself. So giving the students a real world task that has a real impact on others and addresses a real need, authenticity of the project. And it gives students that motivation to try harder than when it's a small audience of just your classmates and your teacher. I've heard at some conferences, and this one's always stuck with me, when you're doing things just for your teacher, you're gonna do it good enough to get the grade, right? It's gonna be good enough work. But when there's a real authentic purpose for their learning and people are going to either utilize whatever the students are creating or making or investigating, there's an intrinsic motivation to want to participate in that and help somebody and support this cause and please those that are helping, that you're supporting. And that is really motivating for this process. So authenticity is a great part of this. Student voice and choice is what separates true project-based learning from fake project-based learning, or projects for project's sake, as I mentioned earlier. It's not project-based learning if you set out with your challenge question and you get your students working on the inquiry process and creating an authentic product, but you end up getting 30 of the same thing back from your students. That's when you didn't give your students project-based learning. That's when you gave them a recipe and they followed it and you got your project back. How many times have you either participated in a project that sounds just like this, or you've seen fellow educators doing something like this? It's not bad for students to start off with that. That just can't be the end of all the learning experience. There's a place for giving students directions and having them follow them, but it's not the learning place. The learning process has active student voice and choice in this. It creates a sense of ownership in the students. They care more about a project and work harder. If the students aren't able to use their judgment when solving problems and answering the driving question, the project, it feels like they're just following those directions that they are doing because you've set out a worksheet or a project for them to follow the recipe and give you back what you asked for. So I encourage you to think outside the box with this and really allow students to have creative choice over what they create. Have them participate in developing the essential questions at times. Have them choosing their group roles that they take because it's something that they're interested in. You know, I always use this analogy. Maybe you have this really amazing video editor or podcaster or t-shirt designer among your students, and you didn't even know it. Right? Each student really does have something that they're passionate about. It's up to us to uncover that passion and allow them to express it in the learning process. So utilize that podcaster or that video editor and allow them to create something that they're going to spend countless hours on because A, it's going to impact an authentic task and audience, and B, it's something that they actually are engaged in and excited about. Instead of just doing something and choosing a group role that means nothing to them, have them make an impact on their student learning. Let's talk about the next step. So the next step on the gold standard wheel there is reflection. So once you have your students involved and engaged, and they're participating in the process, it's a constant reflection on their learning. So have the students, guide the students as the facilitator of learning, reflecting on what they're learning, how they're learning it, why they're learning in this way. Have them participate in creation of whatever products you want, whatever, however you want them to document the learning process. So sometimes the process is even more important than the learning itself, right? It's more important than the product. Have them have journals or both formative and summative assessments throughout the way. Think about how this might apply elsewhere, how the learning, either what they've learned or how they've learned it, how they might apply it beyond the project into their other classrooms or into their everyday life. Have students internalize what the skills really mean and set goals for future growth, for their futures, for future ready skills to be a part of who they are. So reflection both on the project itself and as they're participating in the learning process is a huge part of project-based learning. And doing it with their peers and doing it with other people that are participating in the learning with them has a really meaningful impact. And if you've ever seen that happen in your classroom during PBL, it's very impactful to me as a teacher. I really have enjoyed watching that part of the process because students can say things to each other that mean something, that impact them. And they have a way of doing it all the time in their everyday life to help and to constructively criticize and to really just impact and reach the student. You know, you could say the same thing to your child as the peer says to your child, and you're like, oh man, I said that 5 times, but since their friend said it, right, then it means something to them. Think about that as we're participating in this peer learning process. So PBL can produce high quality student work if this critique and revision, if this number 6 design element is well done. PBL doesn't have to produce high quality student work, but it has the potential. So have you ever heard your fellow teachers or teachers that have participated in project-based learning talk about that their students just amaze them with what they've created? You know, students need to be taught how to give that constructive feedback, that I was just talking about. But teachers, as you critique and revise and make the script perfect, or make the students, you know, reach higher potential than they ever thought that they could reach on their own, creating something. It is really inspiring. It's really exciting to see. Experts and adults or your administrators, that, you know, other people can contribute to the critique and revision process. Bring in an authentic, real world people to this part of the process. You don't only have to bring them to the end and the showcase and the big reveal. You can have them in on this part of it so that they see how hard the students are working, so that they push students to levels the students didn't think that they could get on their own. So that really motivational part of this, making the learning visible, whether it be through a reflection journal or whether it be through whatever that learning process is. If you can discuss the learning and make the learning visible, students will want to make whatever they create public. They'll want to show how authentic this is. They'll want to put it online. They'll want to share it. They'll want to tweet it out. They'll want it displayed in the halls of their schools. They're going to want to provide a service that is actually used by people in the real world. So that being said, the next step is creating that public product. And like I said, it can really be this high quality project. Sometimes the PBL ends here. Sometimes we don't actually get to the public product. And here's why. If the problem or challenge question that you set out to figure out and find out ends up with the students learning that whatever the question is or the challenge is wasn't possible, or doesn't make a difference, or have decided to go off the one bowling alley lane and onto a whole nother bowling alley lane, right? You've allowed them to skip over the bumpers. It might not look exactly how you expected it to be in the beginning, but the process that the students have gone through to get there is absolutely meaningful and impactful to their learning experience. So sometimes not reaching the answer and not getting what they thought is more impactful, and they have more to say and more to share and more to show than if they actually got to the right, per se, accurate product. So this public product, though it's called a product, doesn't have to be tangible, right? It can be a presentation or the solution to whatever they're trying to solve, or maybe it's just the prototypes or the beginnings of something. But sharing it and presenting it to others encourages that high quality work and has motivating power for the students. Figuring out an effective way to communicate this with various audiences is also a really essential skill that the students need to learn to be successful moving forward, is how to talk to different audiences, how to take whatever they're saying and make it sound professional or dull it down for a not as educated audience. If they're doing a presentation for lower level students, elementary schoolers, if they're high schoolers, etc. But it really gives them that ability to think through the audience that they are sharing to, their parents or community members, or if they're just putting it out there on the web. It really starts to get them to think about who the product is going to and what they have to do to make that successful and happen. The part that I left for last, but actually is where we started and where we're going to end, is what's right there in the middle. The key knowledge, understanding, and success skills that is essential and critical to any project-based learning. It is the student learning goals that we set out in the very beginning, the standards that you want them to cover, the skill development that you want them to get. It is at the center of both the wheel on the screen and any well-designed project that is project-based learning. They learn to apply knowledge to the real world, the key knowledge and understanding. They use that knowledge to solve problems, answer those complex questions, create high-quality products. The success skills are just as important and meaningful to students as they venture out from your classroom walls. Whether you've taught them about research skills or you've taught them about digital citizenship and created their digital identity, whether you've wanted them to share a product, but you're going to do it a specific way because it's more meaningful and it's going to reach the right people this way. In our district, those success skills, we call them skills for future-ready graduates, ePathway skills for future-ready graduates. And we have our students learning, participating, interacting, and growing to learn skills such as collaboration and perseverance. And you might want to call them, or you might in your district call them, utilize the 4 C's or the Project 21 skills. But they're the soft skills that the students gain beyond the academic standards that they learn. It's equally as important for the student's success to have those skills embedded in what they do. And project-based learning allows for these skills to be cultivated and embedded into the learning process, into who their students become, into who they are, and into the way that they work with others, which is a key and critical component to student success moving forward. Now that we've talked about the what, the why, and the how of project-based learning, I'm going to leave you with a couple helpful tips if you are starting to embark on planning for project-based learning tomorrow. So here are some helpful tips on project-based learning. I'm going to start with this. Project-based learning is a process. It's a journey. It promotes synergy. It's not a one-and-done thing. It is iterative. It is a plan in quotation marks, or plan with an asterisk. It is not just one time thing that you plan for and never tweak and adapt. Especially because we want the students to have choice. The more student-centered and learner-centered it is, the better and more meaningful and impactful this learning happens. I can't stress this point enough. Let the students choose. Let go. Planning for something that you're doing and you're stuck and you're bouncing ideas back and forth and you don't really like any of the ideas you're coming up with, let the kids choose. Ask the kids. Ask what they're passionate about. The more you include them in the process, the more ownership that they have. They can have choice about that final product, right? I already talked about the t-shirt designer or the podcaster. Let it be something that they're excited about, or maybe something that they've always wanted to try, but they didn't know where to start. And you can help them start, but then they'll take it and run with it. At the beginning only that they have this choice. Have them have some choice along the way. I encourage you to be open to variety about what you're going to get as the final products. I encourage you to have open-ended directions, not a set of directions that are more like a recipe. And encourage you to encourage student creativity. Another helpful tip is that it's okay if sometimes you have to build some background knowledge. You can still do that in an innovative, engaging way. So sometimes to embark on this project-based learning, we need to build some background knowledge, and we have all those little drawers filled up with some lessons learned. Maybe you want them to participate in a web quest, or you want them to build a prototype, or you want them to do that, but also allow them to fill those drawers as they go. So you can balance between building the background knowledge and then allowing some of the drawers maybe not to be fully closed and ready, but just a little enough empty that the students explore and figure out this learning themselves. Another one is time. Students need time to work, explore, and process. Since project-based learning is a process and a journey, set a deadline, make a rubric, plan for that peer feedback and critique and revision, but be flexible. And that is one of the hardest things to implement in today's classrooms, in today's learning, in the way that the current structure of education is. So this is something that needs to be tweaked and discussed and agreed upon beforehand, that this takes a different amount of time. The more familiar students are with the project-based learning process, the less time it begins to take. But especially the first time, grabbing students and letting them go with some structure, it's a push-pull, give-take that about this whole time management part of it. So one of the things we all struggle with is we know, and we can pick them out for whatever subject we teach, whatever grade level we're in. What are those difficult standards that you dread figuring out a way to get them to them? You can use PBL to teach those difficult, hard to reach standards, because the process increases motivation and engagement when learning this way, and you can stand to make the boring standards or the difficult standards fun and engaging for these students. So I encourage you that that's a helpful tip and trick that some of our teachers really live and die by, is teaching the difficult standards through this project-based learning process. I encourage you to, throughout the process, put an obstacle or multiple obstacles in the student's path. Encourage them to practice perseverance and grit. Real world has these challenges, right? If you make a plan and everything goes according to plan, right? How often does that actually happen in the real world, in real life? Give them a reason for purposeful struggle. Don't push them out of their comfort zone so far that they don't want to come back in, but do give them, encourage them to take some risks. Give them something along the way. I was talking with one of my colleagues the other day, and we were remembering that a couple years ago we had a Minecraft camp in one of our middle schools. And the students were creating and building in Minecraft, and it was like a social studies and science themed summer camp using Minecraft. And they were learning specific science and social studies standards. And they were building this community, and they were building it in this location. They were using Minecraft to show as their product. And overnight, the teachers went in and a hurricane came through the Minecraft village. So they learned all about weather patterns, and they learned about all the different things that can happen. And so they had to rebuild in a different area, and they had to learn about the climate and why they would rebuild in this area because it has these natural disasters, not these, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was a purposeful obstacle put in the students' path to engage them and create the learning experience and create that purposeful struggle in the students that were participating in this project-based learning. This is a hard one for teachers. Sometimes it's more about the process than it is about the final product. Grade the process. Give feedback on the process. Examine the whole portfolio of learning, not the product itself. Are you going to create some really high quality products? Yeah, a lot of project-based learning comes up, processes with students creating these really great high quality products, but not always. The learning process is more important for the students to be a part of, that inquiry, the authenticity, that real meaningful learning experience. Make sure you're not only grading that final product. Let your students wow you. Don't have an expectation for what they're going to share with you at the very end of this whole project and grade them on whether or not they got close to what you expected. Allow them to wow you and explore, and allow yourself to think outside the box for if the students created and brainstormed something different than what you expected. Your feedback as a teacher absolutely matters to the students. The authentic feedback absolutely matters to them as they're participating. That continuous feedback, being the facilitator of the learning process, putting those bumpers on, getting them back on track, it is absolutely essential to true project-based learning and being that facilitator in the learning process. I encourage you to go back to your classrooms next school year, to go tomorrow to your professional development, to go into your planning and try something. Try something out of the box that you haven't tried before to innovate your classroom and your learning for your students. I'm really excited to hopefully share some more ideas with you today. I encourage you to reach out to me on social media. My Twitter handle is @NicholinaC, NICHOLINAC. That's me, and I will be around on the Canvas community. Feel free to reach out to me and ask me any kinds of questions. I'm happy to brainstorm ideas with you, and I hope that you really got something out of this project-based learning webinar this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nicolina. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. We can definitely address them here, or as noted, we can always go to the event page where you can post your questions there as well. We'll wait a few seconds to see if anybody has any questions. It doesn't look like there's anything here, but we are definitely getting a good positive feedback on the session, and a good reminder that you know, project-based learning is definitely a good tool to have, a good process. Just a reminder to everybody that we do have one more session. Nicolina is going to present next week, same time, same place, right?
Yeah.
And we will finish off the series with that third session, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much again, Nicolina, for being here. We appreciate your insights, and we really love that you are sharing all this great information with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it too.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day.